Is off the air today because of racist and sexist comments, and today Americans are debating the question, what is okay to say? Is Imus being held to a new standard? And if so, what about others who spew hate on the public airwaves? Hillary Rosen is a Democratic strategist and former chairman and CEO of the Recording Industry Association of America, and Michelle Bernard is president of the Independent Women's Forum. Welcome to both of you. Let me ask you, because we're having this debate about some of the other stuff that's out there on the air. When there are comments like that by radio show hosts, specifically about women, accomplished women journalists, too, what should be the appropriate response?
Actually, Michael Savage has had a lot of shows taken away from him. He recently had, he signed with Creative Artists Agency, and they dropped him after some nasty comments. So he actually has had some punishment. I think the issue here, though, is he's kind of going after a public figure. And in public discourse, it's not always pretty, and it gets nasty and even gets towards sort of nasty hate speech. But in this case, I think the difference between what he did and what somebody like Imus did was he was going after somebody who has a platform to go back at him.
Yeah, but calling an accomplished woman the S word is a way of demeaning her accomplishments, no doubt, right?
No doubt.
Yeah. Michelle, let me also ask you about Ann Coulter. You're president of the Independent Women's Forum, which is a conservative women's organization. Ann Coulter is sometimes called a conservative woman. She also, of course, makes...
She's called a lot of things.
Yes, she is.
The nicest thing most people call her.
People sort of laughed at that, and you saw everybody's mouth drop open. She recently made a comment about John Edwards, calling him the F word, suggesting that he was gay as well. Why isn't she ostracized, and why instead is she embraced by conservatives?
I don't know if she's embraced by conservatives. After she made the comments at the CPAC conference, I think conservatives as well as liberals around the nation denounced her comments. They were totally, totally off the mark. And one of the things that...
But I was listening to her on Fox the other night, and she said some people dropped her column after something, but she makes so much more money now because of it. So what?
Well, I mean, here's what's interesting about Ann Coulter. She answers to nobody. She is her own employer. She can go out on the airwaves. She gets ratings. People bring her on television because they know she's going to say something outrageous and something that is going to garner more people, looking at her on their television stations. She answers to no one, and that is a problem.
Well, let me ask you then: should cable networks, which by the way are not public airwaves, they are paid for. You pay for a subscription, just like you do CNN or Fox. The CBS, ABC, and NBC, anybody can get those free, but the cable channels are a different thing. Should cable channels let people like that be on their air?
Well, and I think it's not really true that she answers to nobody, that she's her own employer. Her employment is fueled by media companies that give her an outlet, which I think is the point. I think that what NBC and what CBS did this week is something that hasn't been done very much, which is what's our corporate responsibility to keep bad speech, inappropriate speech, offensive speech, and hate speech off the air when we're controlling the station. That's not censorship. Censorship is government sanctioned.
But there's also something else. I mean, people need to remember, as we talk about Imus, you could just turn off Msnbc in the morning. You didn't have to watch him, and you don't have to listen to him on the radio. And believe me, I think he's a vile human being, and he got his just desserts. But we don't necessarily need more government involvement. Turn off the television.
But it wasn't the government that got rid of it.
No, exactly. And that's why we always say, the free market worked. Advertisers were pulling out, and people wanted nothing to do with them. So the system really, really does work, and it works in a good way. In the African American community, one of the things that we are particularly bereft with and need to do something about, though, is what led him to feel comfortable to make the statements that he said. We've got rap lyrics that are constantly calling black women bitches and hoes and a lot of other things. I'm not a bitch. I'm not a hoe. I don't want that music being put out. I don't want people buying it. And within the black community,
well, let me ask you, because there are a lot of black owners then of black music.
Yes.
So, in other words, who run these entertainment labels who make a lot of money selling dirty rap music to African Americans and whites too,
yes,
that demean primarily black women.
And here's what's really interesting. You will drive anywhere in America, whether it is a black neighborhood or a white neighborhood, and see, you know, affluent white children listening to rap music
Right.
and calling people, hey, my N,
Right.
you know, or calling women bitches and hoes, because we are getting to a point in our culture where you're growing up, you're hearing this, you're desensitized, and you don't know that it's wrong, but don't buy the music.
You
And
absolutely have to make a distinction, though, I think, when we talk about,
Well, isn't the
I want to
distinction
talk
then
about
that there
hip-hop.
is do these artists and do the businesses that represent these artists have a moral obligation to start taking those kind of words out of the music? I mean, it's not those words that are selling these albums in and of themselves. They could still create the same music per se and rhymes and all the things that people like about hip hop without using the N word and without calling making derogatory comments about women. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I tell you, Norah, this week we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Alex Haley's Roots. And I've been staying up late every night watching it, and haven't seen it since I was a young girl.
Yeah, I remember that too.
But you
yeah.
remember it. Well,
yeah.
When I started watching it and thinking about this all in the context of Don Imus, the N word is used over and over and over again. And when you talk about the historical treatment of black women that were slaves and concubines, and the words that were used to refer to black women by their slavers, it's horrible that our black men do this in their music. And so they do have a moral obligation to censor themselves. I don't think the government should censor them, but they should censor themselves. Why would we do this to ourselves, what was done to us historically?
There's some talk, Michelle, sometimes, as you know, artists have used this, feminists have sometimes said this too, that when you use that word yourself, as an African American or a woman may use it, then you can appropriate the language for yourself and you can bring strength back. Do you buy that argument? Or are we past that at this point? Forget the appropriation of the
I used to buy that argument, and I used to use the N word jokingly. I will never, ever do it again. We are denigrating ourselves. We are a community in crisis, and every time we use that word, every time we celebrate not being educated or that it's white to be educated or to act a certain way, we are doing more harm than good to our community.
Let me ask you, since you were once the head of the Recording Industry Association of America, where in this whole debate, you know, we've been on all day today on MSNBC. We've been covering this on a lot of different cable channels as well. Where are the hip hop artists today saying